Hi everyone, welcome to Dennis Deep Cuts, this seventh installment of my fine YouTube series. Today we're going to talk about the debut record. I'm going to show you some of my favorite ones and then talk about what it means to put out a debut album and what it does to you. For most of us, the debut album is a record that you put out, and if you're lucky, you'll have some ideas, traces that you can expand upon and build upon, and then eventually, hopefully, you can find your own identity and you can find your own voice. Some people, however, they come out of the gate almost fully formed, and the debut is exactly their voice, it's exactly who they are, and then they just build upon that and expand upon that and have a illustrious and fantastic career. And then you have some people where the debut record is just a little bit too good, a little bit too powerful, and they have a lot of problems following up on that initial burst of creativity or that initial success maybe. Today I'm going to talk about the latter two. Great debut albums, and then different where their careers went and so on and so forth. And there's also another category, which is the band or the artist that put out a debut record that's also their only record. I figured I was going to do a full episode of the greatest bands in the world that only put out one album. So I'm not going to talk about any of those debuts today. Like Sex Pistols, they only put out one record, and we're not going to talk about it today, even though it's one of the greatest debut albums of all time. But I'll make that list eventually, and I'm sure it'd be mostly DC hardcore that only put out one record. One of the things that I find interesting is that when I looked at this, when I started thinking about this idea, I looked at the landscape of music, and a lot of the big artists that we like and love, it took them a while to find their footing. It took them a while to become exactly who they are, put out their greatest record. You look at Slayer, Raining Blood is their third record, or even Bruce Springsteen, Born to Run is his third record. I'm not saying by any means that the records before that are bad, but I'm saying that sometimes you need to build to find, the essence of what you are. Fleetwood Mac's Rumors, which is one of their finest hours, is their 11th album, and I think Harvest with Neil Young is his 5th record. And if you're like me, you love David Bowie, then you have Ziggy Stardust. This is also his 5th record. And I think Low, which is my favorite, it's his 11th album. So I mean, that's just kind of what it looks like. Prince, Purple Rain, maybe his 6th album, even. My debut record wasn't that great. Okay, so I'm sure there's people out there that would be like, this just might be the truth. No, that is Refused Finest Hour. And there are also people out there that will go, I love the first demo. All of this is highly, highly subjective. All of this is just my thoughts and my ideas about it. I'm sure there are people that think that Show No Mercy or Hell Awaits are way superior to Raining Blood. I'm just saying. I'm just trying to make some sort of connections here and map out what it means to put out a debut record. I'm mostly known for Sheep of Punk to Come. That's our 3rd record. And as I said, our debut wasn't that great. And I stand by that. Subjectively, you can still think so at that time, that place, and you heard it and it meant a lot to you. It's fine. I'm not going to take that away from you. But my experience of the creative aspect, of the songwriting aspect, of everything wasn't that great. We didn't have enough songs. So we in panic mode, we wrote a whole slew of songs like the week before we went into the studio. Per, the guitar player, who was a great guitar player, but I think he wanted to do something very different than me and David, and there was a little bit of a, you know, sense of where are we going, what's our direction. It's also the first time we went to a big studio. We went down to Stockholm to the Sunlight studio, and for reasons that, you know, unknown, we decided to play a couple of shows in the middle of the recording. I blew out my voice. We came back to the studio, and as it was in those days, it was like, all right, now you have 6 hours to do vocals on all the songs and you have no voice. What am I going to do? And no one said, maybe you should go home for a week and rest and then come back and boom, finish strong. But I pushed through. My vocals are weak and not very impressive because I blew out my voice playing live. You know, so looking back at that record, I'm like, oh, it's not a great debut. It has some fragments here and there of things to come. But it's not a great debut. You know, Pump the Brakes is still a good song, and people still want to hear that. Regardless, now I'm going to talk about some great debut records, and yeah, let's see what we got. What better way to start a little show about debut records than with a record that's called Debut. This is Bjork's first record, Debut, from 1993. Bjork was by no means a debutante in the record industry by this point. She released her first record when she was 11 years old. It's extremely expensive on Discogs. And then she was in a punk band, an anarchist punk band called Kukul, that put out 2 records that are really cool on Crass Records, which is really rad. And then that sort of morphed into Sugar Cubes, which is, I mean, might to this day be the biggest pop band out of Iceland. They're like a weird, nervy, eccentric B-52s from Iceland. And that's where I discovered Bjork, because I really liked the Sugar Cubes. They put out 3 records, and then this happened. When this record came out, I listened to it obsessively. That summer, I remember that summer when that came out, I listened to it all the time. I love Bjork's voice since before, and I love this new direction that she's going in, a bit more, you know, electronic and a bit more modern, maybe. It's a fantastic debut, and it's something that she took this record and built upon that, and still has an amazing career and still puts out amazing records. So we were going up north to celebrate Christmas, and my partner put this record on, and I started thinking about debut records. That's kind of where the idea came from. And I started thinking, like, wow, imagine putting out a record that's this fully formed in your mind, you know, like the songwriting, the production, the attitude, everything was, it felt like here's a band that's been doing this forever. And it's the Strokes' first record, Is This It, from 2001. It's a fantastic record, and the same thing, when it came out, it was one of those records that just felt like it felt finished. Like the way they looked, the way they sounded, the way that their songs were structured, just great. And there's this whole wave of garage rock, whatever you want to call it, and the Strokes just came in the right place, the right time, and it's just a great record. I listened to it so much, and I was lucky enough to see them live on this record, because Noise Conspiracy played Coachella the same year they played, and they played this record from start to finish, and it was great. This is the European pressing. The Americans, they of course censored the artwork because this is a bit too racy for the Americans, and it also has the song New York City Cops on it, which was removed from some of the versions. The Strokes, it's kind of similar to Bjork. They took this record, a great foundation to build upon it, but I don't think they ever reached the same heights as this record. I think that every record the Strokes ever put out, there's great songs on it, but there isn't a single record that's as this cohesive and coherent as this one. They just put out a new record in 2020, I think, and they're still at it. But this is a debut it's just phenomenal. Speaking of phenomenal debuts, here's a record that came out in 1987, and it took a full year for this record to become #1 in the charts. And I am, of course, talking about Guns N' Roses' Appetite for Destruction. I remember this came out in 1987. I had a friend that was into hard rock and heavy metal, and he said, this is a great band, Guns N' Roses, you should check it out. And I did, and I liked it. Surprisingly enough, because at that point I was like, I still had one foot in like metal and one foot in punk and hardcore, and I was definitely not listening to hard rock, but I really liked this record. And I remember having a tape with Descendants Live Age on one side and Appetite for Destruction on the other side. And it's a fantastic record. We don't really need to talk about it that much. Kind of like the Strokes, they had a little bit of difficulty following it up. Use Your Illusion, it has some good stuff on there, but there's just too much. They're trying a little bit too hard almost. And then we all know about Chinese Democracy. Chinese Democracy, I want to do a full episode where I just talk about Chinese Democracy one of these days. But what a debut record, you know? Amazing. Guns N' Roses. And I love the idea. I love the fact that it took it an entire year for it to be noticed. Like, the record came out, they pushed it, they put out singles, they started playing live, and nothing much happened. And then eventually there's this landslide. I think it was a Sweet Child of Mine, you know, and then they became like the biggest rock band in the world. So yeah, great. Guns N' Roses ended up selling 30 million copies of their debut record. Now we're going to talk about a record that did not sell 30 million copies. I think it sold 30,000 copies. MC5 Kick Up the Jams. It sold 30,000 copies on its initial release, but it might be one of the most influential proto-punk, garage rock, psychedelic rock and roll records of all time. MC5 out of Detroit, super political. People say they were the greatest live band of all times, or one of the greatest live band of all times. Which, if you look at any YouTube clip of them, yes, they were. Which is interesting, because then the record label say, you're such a great live band, let's just record your debut record live. So it's a live record, and it's not like a live record where it's like, you know, Kiss Alive or something, where it's like the greatest hits. No, this is their debut record. It's just like all those songs, and it's just recorded live. From start to finish, an amazing record, great energy, great band. All their records are great. All the records very, very different. And, you know, MC5, like, it's one of the most influential rock bands of all time. Wayne Kramer said that he is releasing a new MC5 record soon, which is slightly weird since most people in that band are dead. But you never know, it might be exciting as well. So MC5, kick out the jams, motherfuckers. So this next record, I bought it when it came out. Well, maybe not exactly when it came out. I think I bought it in '89. It came out in '88, and it's the Stone Roses debut record. From start to finish, an amazing record that you need to own, and yeah, it's just great. Groovy, indie, Manchester, just a record that defined a time and place, really. They're one of those interesting bands, because I think this record was so successful and it's so great that how do you follow it up? And then I'm sure they could have. The big problem was that when this record was done and they became a really big band, they got entangled in legal troubles, and it took them almost 5 years to release a new album. And when you're a young person, 5 years is an eternity. Like, you can change your complete outlook on life in 5 years when you're young, or you can change completely. Like, this is the music that I listen to, and then 5 years later, that's all yesterday's news. So it makes sense that the second record came out and it was something completely different, because 5 years is a long time. They broke up, got back together, broke up again. This record is one of the finest debut albums of all time. Stone Roses. Next record is a band that I remember seeing on MTV in 1990, early 90s. And I was just like, this band is super whack. I don't understand it at all. And one of those bands, wrong place at the wrong time for multiple reasons. And it's Jellyfish with their debut album, Belly Bottoms. This, as I said, when I saw it, is the way they looked and the way the artwork looked and their videos. They looked like a bunch of really wonky magicians, and I was like, I can't get behind this. But when you get past that, it's amazing orchestral psychedelic power pop. It's just great. But this record is fantastic. In 1990, hair metal was at the height of its powers, and then these guys come out, and people are like, who are these people? Why are they looking like that? And what's this music? So, you know, their record got some good reviews, and, you know, they had a little bit of a cult following, but, you know, no one really cared that much. Wrong place, wrong time. For the follow-up, half the band left. The main songwriters remained in the band, and they recorded a follow-up called Spilt Milk, released at the height of the grunge era. And this is what the album looks like. Their artwork's horrible, and they broke up, and, you know, they haven't done any reunions or anything. Talk about being at the wrong place at the wrong time. And maybe, you know, the image didn't really help them. But this record is fantastic. It's such a good record. And I had a lot of prejudice towards this record until I actually sat down and listened to it. It's a very, very good record. Next one, from 1992, one of my favorite artists, PJ Harvey's debut record, Dry. Interestingly enough, PJ Harvey on Dry and Rid of Me was a band, of course fronted by Polly Jean Harvey. It's not until the third record where PJ Harvey becomes like a proper solo project. PJ Harvey is one of those artists that came out of the gate with a very distinct voice in lyrics. The way she plays her guitar is still very, you know, you can hear immediately that it's PJ. And this is just a fantastic debut. PJ is one of those artists that the debut is great, and then it just, every record is fantastic in different ways. And yeah, it's just an amazing debut album, and people should be lucky if they could put out great debuts like this. All right, I am going to, there's only a couple more left, and I'm going to show you a record that's, most of you might not have heard about this one, but it's a fantastic debut record, and we listened to this like we were obsessed. And it's a local band called Isolation Years with their debut record, Inland Traveler, from 2001. These guys, they played in hardcore bands in the 90s, not because they were hardcore people, but just they played music, and then you end up in hardcore bands. Like, the singer and the drummer from Isolation Years was in local legends Abhinanda at the tail end of their career. And the bass player was also in my brother's band Eclipse, I think, for a little bit. This is psychedelic, indie, folky, just amazing. They're still active and they still play music. Not Isolation Years, but the people in the band are still active and they still play music. Isolation Years ended up putting out 4 records. They're all great, but the first one, just the production, the way it sounds, made us instantly fall in love with this record. Noise Conspiracy even played a bunch of shows with them, and yeah, it's just one of those. It's just one of those bands that me and David, every time we meet, we talk about Isolation Years and how great they were, and how great their debut record is. So check it out if you haven't heard it. Isolation Years. This next one needs, well, the next 2 doesn't really need a whole lot of introduction, but this one definitely not so much. From 1967, Velvet Underground, Andy Warhol with Nico, you know, with a torso on the back and half a peeled banana on the front. A fantastic debut record. Nico went on to do some really cool solo stuff. Velvet Underground, of course, did 3 more records. They're all fabulous. And then Lou Reed, I think he did some records as well. It's very much a product of its time and place, but it's just an amazing record. And lucky enough to find this original pressing when I was touring the States a couple of years back, and makes me very happy to have a half-peeled banana at home. And then you have debut records that define generations of music and ideas, and this is it, you know. Joy Division, Unknown Pleasure, one of the greatest debuts of all time. It's a template to what we all look at when we create music, basically. Just an amazing debut. We don't need to talk about Joy Division that much. It's just, yeah, just fucking amazing. So there you have it, a bunch of amazing debut records. I know there's tons of them that I didn't talk about. What's your favorite debut album? I'm sure I'll make another one of these. I also want to make a list where the worst debut album of all time. Great bands, the worst debut album. I think that could be fun. Thanks for checking this out, and thanks for following me on this fucking journey. And like, share, subscribe, all that nonsense. And until next time, stay wild, my friends.